February 18th, 2001, Michael Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt Jr. crossed the finish line first and second to conclude the 43rd running of the Daytona 500. At that moment, Dale Earnhardt Sr. tragically dies on the spot on the final turn. NASCAR in response took safety very seriously, implementing stronger harness device, head and neck support, and were in the works of installing safer barriers.
Eventually, all those safety things that they deployed after Dale Earnhardt's death, I think the biggest thing was the safer barrier, which was actually already in the works at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They already had kind of like a safer barrier project going on where they were testing Indy cars crashing.
Well, with the Gen 4 era, that wasn't the most safe generation of stock cars, and the drivers were free to wear open face helmets, not use the Hans device. It was much more lenient. Like, I feel like back in that day, it was more about the racing product. Once Dale passed, the car tomorrow rolled out, the Hans device was required, and NASCAR took 50 steps forward with safety. They did a great job ever since his death.
In the meantime, Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, or DEI for short, was on a healing recovery process. The following race at Rockingham saw Dale Earnhardt Jr. crash into the turn 4 wall on the opening lap. The next day, his teammate Steve Park ran in the front pack for most of the race, to which shocked and surprised a lot of people, considering Rockingham Speedway was one of the tracks Steve did poorly in the Winston Cup Series. Thanks to Dale Sr. a few years prior to this race, he taught Steve Park how to run on the circuit and find the best racing line. Earnhardt's teaching proved to pay off big time, especially in this situation, because what happens next has entered NASCAR history.
Here we go. He runs him all the way up to the wall in turn 3 and 4. They'll be coming for the white flag. Here we go. Labonte gets loose. 1 lap to go. This is it.
Park wiggled and got into Labonte. He's going to make a run on the outside right here. Come on, buddy.
Steve Park trying for his second Winston Cup win.
Got to run.
Labonte.
He's got to run down the inside. Park blocks him a little bit.
Couldn't block him.
All right, Bobby, he's off early. He's going to gas it hard, and here they're going to come to the line. It's going to be a photo finish.
Park has the run off the high side. He clears the body, and Steve Park scores the second straight win for Earnhardt Incorporated and the second win of his career.
Man, what a great finish.
Dale's the one who taught me how to drive this place, and he told me to stay off the brakes, and we stayed off the brakes all day long and won the race. So, God bless the whole family. Thank God for this. He's been with us all weekend. We also like to thank Pennzoil. They've just been a great sponsor. We got a great race team here. Nabisco, Nutter Butter, Snap-on Tools, just all the guys. Coca-Cola.
Despite this, DEI would still struggle during the first half of the 2001 season, although there were times they were close to securing the W, such as Darlington and Dover, for example, both of which, courtesy to Steve Park, finishing runner-up to Dale Jarrett and Jeff Gordon. As for Michael Waltrip, he was well off the pace and had failed to finish inside the top 10. Dale Jr., on the other hand, was also inconsistent here and there, but still managed to get a few top 5s and top 10s. As you'd imagine, the healing process took quite some time for Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, leading up to the Pepsi 400 coming back to Daytona. When 4th of July weekend 2001 rolled around, it was time to return to the same track that claimed the life of Dale Sr. 5 months prior.
NBC Sports presents NASCAR. Tonight, it's the Pepsi 400 at Daytona.
The Daytona International Speedway was filled with an atmosphere of remembrance, recalling Dale Earnhardt's most memorable moments during his time in NASCAR both on and off the track. Without a doubt, Dale Jr. was the heavy favorite in the Pepsi 400 on this particular night, as many people wanted Little E to give it his all and win for his father. Other people wanted Michael Waltrip to do well and also score a victory, considering Waltrip was definitely suffering from a slump. Therefore, a win in the Pepsi 400 would also be a huge moment in Waltrip's career, having a shot to complete the sweep at Daytona. The last driver to do so at this time was Bobby Allison back in 1982. 1996 winner of the race, Sterling Marlin, was on pole, with Ward Burton alongside. Tony Stewart, fresh from his good pace from the first half, following 2 wins at Richmond and Sonoma, had to make do with a starting place of 36th. Kevin Harvick, who was tapped into Dale Earnhardt's now rebranded 29 car, lined up 10th on the grid for his first Winston Cup Daytona race. On the other note, Harvick was one of the 5 drivers who had a chance at an extra $1 million bonus in the Winston No Bull 5 program if he won the race. Mark Martin, Bobby Labonte, Tony Stewart, and Jeff Burton were others who were eligible for the prize. 1995 and 1998 winner Jeff Gordon qualified his Pepsi-sponsored Chevy in the top 5. 5 drivers weren't fast enough to get in this race, those being Ron Hornaday, Mike Bliss, Buckshot Jones, Andy Hillenburg, and Hutch Strickland. Buckshot Jones actually had a fast car during one of the practice sessions, but in qualifying, he didn't make the cut. As the cars did their pace laps, everyone had their eyes on Dale Earnhardt Jr., given that he was the most odds-on favorite. With that in mind, off they went.
20 straight weeks of racing to decide the NASCAR Winston Cup Series champion begin now. The crowd is on its feet. The 43rd Pepsi 400 goes green on NBC.
Just like in the Daytona 500 months before, Sterling Marlin leads the pack alongside Ward Burton. Michael Waltrip too was also on the move.
And Michael Waltrip, the Daytona 500 winner in the 15 car. Michael started back in 22nd spot. It's up to 8th, racing for 7th and 6th.
Some drivers were playing it safe, running way back behind. Tony Stewart was one of them, including his teammate Bobby Labonte. Dale Jarrett was in the back of the bus as well, but in his case, having a hard time coping with the handling of his race car in terms of his car running hot in traffic. Meanwhile, at the front, lead changes went back and forth. Nearly 20 laps in, already some big movers not wasting time. One of them being Mike Wallace, who was at this particular portion of the 2001 season fighting to keep his ride in the 7 car, and considering he made up 32 spots at this rate, things were looking good. For Mike Skinner, same thing, pushing his guts out to stay in the 31 car for the entire 2001 season. Given that he was struggling throughout the year, his future at this point in time at RCR looked in doubt. RCR teammate Kevin Harvick was learning where and when to put his car at the right place at the right time. Past lap 20, Michael Waltrip and Mike Skinner shot past Sterling Marlin's Silver Bullet. Marlin finds himself approaching rock bottom, realizing his car encounters a problem.
Sterling Marlin has led the last 13 laps of the race. I think everybody's got the idea he's got a very strong car.
He's waving his arm. He's waving his arm. Waving his hand inside the car. He's got something wrong. Man, he can get run off.
The 01 right behind you.
His teammate Jason left from the 01 car.
Whatever it is, he couldn't get to pit road.
Could it be that his car is just not right? Could it be that it's pushing or loose or just not right, and he's decided to go the back and ride till they can make a pit stop and adjust them?
I mean, in one lap, I mean, you know, he's leading the thing, and then all of a sudden in one lap.
Matt Yoakum, what's wrong with Sterling's car?
Alan, talking to Lee McCall, Sterling Marlin's crew chief, he told me that Sterling's complaint is the car is very loose. He's going to try to drop back like a number of the other competitors and just ride in the back until the first round of pit stops, somewhere along lap 52 to 55 to work on this race car. No need to chance anything right now because they have a very stout piece.
Kevin Harvick retakes the lead with a little assistance from Dale Earnhardt Jr. Then, Earnhardt Jr. decides to give what the fans had been waiting for.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. goes for the lead. The fans all jump to their feet.
Still down there. Still there.
Out front,
Clear.
Earnhardt Jr. leads at Daytona.
Check out those fans. They are absolutely loving this as Earnhardt goes to the front.
Shortly after, the Dodge drivers were fading back, including Bill Elliott, who's way back in last place, that of 43rd. He wasn't the only one struggling to keep up. Sure enough, nearly half the percentage of drivers found themselves half loose, having a hard time getting hold of their unsettling race cars. With that said, pit stops will be a very interesting and busy sight to see indeed. Lap 50, some drivers make their way onto pit road to commence green flag pit stops.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. ducks for pit road. The stop will come at lap 50.
Wow. Somebody's way hard on the brakes coming in there.
Jeff Purvis was the one who lit up the brakes.
He will need new tires after that.
Marty Snyder will cover Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s pit stop for us.
And Dale Jr. comes down pit road. He is one of only 3 drivers to finish top 10 in both of the restrictor plate races so far this year. He says the car is just a hair tight. He originally wanted no adjustments, but then he called for a last-second adjustment, quarter pound out of the right rear. That's a very small adjustment. He wants to be a little looser off the turns. Dale Jr. back out on the track. Let's go to Matt Yoakum.
Big Ed Watkins, the jack man. For Casey Atwood, drops the jack. He's down and away. Air pressure. He was very loose. His teammate, Bill Elliott's also in. He's also complaining about a loose condition, as is the Dodge in the 92 of Stacy Compton.
Compton very slow coming to pit road. He was well off the gas in turn 3, so perhaps a further problem there. Here's Johnny Benson on the pit lane. Jeremy Mayfield's in. Rick Mast is in. Ken Schrader's been in.
I'll tell you what, and these guys that strategy-wise were in the back, Benny, I think that's going to hurt them because they're going to come out and they're going to lose that lead draft.
Bill Weber.
Stacy Compton on pit road. His car's been all over the track, loose and tight. They had to get an adjustment to try and fix the handle, but the biggest thing here is that he ran out of fuel on the track. Now he's sitting here. They're going to have to push him to get him started. Compton out of fuel on pit road.
Another whole charge coming off of turn 4, down toward the pit lane. Compton gets it running.
What they were squirting in the air cleaner, in the air intake, was ether, something that's kind of like gas. They're spraying in there in aerosol form. They can spray in there.
Dave Burns.
Mike Wallace is in now. They don't make any chassis adjustments, just 4 tires and fuel for Wallace. He said the car is pretty good. The only thing they've told him is to keep the radiator fan on when you're behind other cars. They're going to pull a tearaway off the windshield, and Wallace is out of here. Let's go to pit.
Ricky Rudd getting 4 tires and fuel. Originally wanted to pit with the 29, but couldn't do that because the 29 was ahead of them on the track, behind them on pit road. They would have had to work their way around them.
Ricky Craven had trouble getting to his pit stall. He overshot it.
Yep. Big time.
And here comes all the other. Oh, Todd Bonat almost ran in the back of the 17 of Matt Kenseth.
Ken Kenseth, Kurt Busch, Mike Skinner, Mark Martin, Kevin Harvick, Sterling Marlin, Jeff Burton, Dale Jarrett is in, Ward Burton's in. The Gibbs cars, Bobby Labonte and Tony Stewart. We go to Matt Yoakum.
Mark Martin already comes to a stop in his pit box. He was complaining of a tight condition. They made an air pressure adjustment in the right front, an air pressure adjustment in the right rear. Front tire changer Robert Benfield has kidney stones. He's okay, but they've got Todd Ziegler standing by. The left side's come out. Let's go to Bill Weber.
4 tires and fuel. Kevin Harvick's first pit stop in a Winston Cup car in a race at Daytona.
Close to 100 laps left to run, and Dale Jr. still leads the hood. The pack tightens up and lines up nose to tail on both the high line and the low line. And then, with 74 laps to go, the first caution of the night.
Now, has Dale Jr. got too big a lead? When they get lined up,
they got trouble here.
Andy Houston in the wall, cautions out. That's off turn 4.
Andy Houston throws a tire right in front of Dave Marcus, putting him out of the race, ranking dead last. Even though the entire field came into the pits during separate green flag stops earlier, most of them came in again for fresh new slicks and more 76 fuel.
And Ken Schrader will come in. He was running great out there. No changes anticipated other than air pressure for Ken at this point. And Newt Moore has this thing cranked up. They spent time in the wind tunnel earlier this year to try to get this right. Let's go to Bill Weber.
Michael Waltrip slid through his pit stall. He has to back up, and now the whole stock will have to start over. It's still supposed to be 4 tires and loosen them up a little bit with a track bar adjustment. Let's go to Marty.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. is in. He clearly had the best car on that run, and he was not happy with it. A little loose off he was. They made a half pound out of or into the left rear, and they will win the race off pit road.
This time, pit road was even busier and more chaotic, as Michael Waltrip and Mike Skinner found out. Dale Jr. was the first one in and the first one out. Behind him was a cluttered jam of bunched up cars. Back to green, and the field of cars provided great racing, challenging Dale Jr. and pushing to the limit. Everyone was on their feet, and on their toes for that matter, as Jr. and Matt Kenseth battled for the lead.
Now we'll see how strong Junior's car is.
Yes, and look at all these cars behind him just clawing for position. We see Schrader literally pushing Kenseth down the straightaway, trying to bump him in front of the 8 car.
Opening laps of the race, Sterling Marlin had the strongest car, dropped back into the field till he could get a couple of pit stops for the crew to adjust the car. He's sneaking back up. He's in 9th spot, while Kenseth and Junior come to the stripe, still going at it for the lead.
Kenseth in 17, Dale Earnhardt Jr. in 8. They raced together in the NASCAR Cup Series for a couple of years. Became pretty good friends, but not friends enough to give the other one the victory.
170,000 seats at Daytona. They're all empty. Everybody's on their feet. About all challengers to his top spot, and there have been a few for a little while now. Earnhardt Jr. went to the front for the first time at lap number 27.
There wasn't room there, Kenseth. There was not room to go on the outside, but somehow he did it.
He did it because Dale Jr. gave him the room.
Man, oh man, there couldn't have been just inches on either side.
At this rate, Dale Earnhardt Jr. has led the most laps, past 250 miles. At the back, Jeff Purvis had problems with the engine, becoming the second retiree. Both Andy Houston and Purvis wouldn't be the only ones on the sidelines for long, because on lap 141,
unless you're deep in the field.
Here come a large pack of front runners. Trouble off the corner.
31.
Several cars involved. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sterling Marlin, Mike Skinner, Jeff Gordon's in it, Bobby Hamilton. Kurt Busch is in the crash. Dale Jarrett takes to the pit road. Terry Labonte's involved. Caution's out.
I didn't see it, but it looked like some guys were trying to get in the pits, and it just stacked up.
See some damage to the right front of Kevin Harvick's car. Not a lot of damage, but damage. Oh, a lot of damage to that automobile.
Ran so well earlier in the night. There's Skinner up against the fence.
Mike's moving around. Looks like he's okay.
Jeff Gordon and Kevin Harvick took their cars straight to pit road.
All right, here they're coming off the corner. And I think there's going to be contact right there. Skinner and Kurt Busch get together. Turn Skinner into the wall head on. Labonte has no place to go. Neither does Bobby Hamilton when Skinner comes back across the racetrack. Now there's no place for anybody to go.
Oh, was that that just stuck by?
Nemechek, yeah.
And
John Andretti.
Dave Marcus gets down on the grass and somehow saves it.
It's a bunch of other cars that I can't really see. It looks like Mike barely missed two other guys coming up towards the trioval. Cars sliding all through the grass. I'm surprised more cars didn't get damaged and get wiped out of the race. When I saw the crash statistics just now, I'm surprised it was just Labonte and Skinner. Yeah, that was definitely on Kurt Busch. Trevor Labonte just had nowhere to go. Ricky Rudd's probably looking in his rearview mirror like, yes, I missed it. Oh my goodness. You can't help but feel bad for all those guys that got collected.
Yeah, he just goes out. The guy behind him taps him a little bit, and there's just no way you can control that. Oh man, yeah, some of those accidents were really nasty.
Yeah, that looks like contact or took the air off him, because I sure as hell know that, because that has to be air. That looks like air, or that looks like contact or took the air off him, because we all know a little bit of, when you hit someone with a little bit of air, that's going to be your mass destruction.
So, you know, I think Skinner or Kurt Busch probably thought Skinner was coming to pit, and I'm pretty sure Kurt was trying to go high, but in the process he tapped Skinner, which caused him to get a little loose, and so Kurt tried to dive higher or go higher to try and really get out of his way, but it just wouldn't work for him. So Skinner just really got turned by Kurt Busch. That's just plate racing. It's an accident. Neither one of them is at fault here, you know. Especially with that bumpy surface, it's easy to get loose out of the four, which it looks like Skinner already was. So it seems that, Kurt Busch was there just to help him a little bit and sent him to the outside wall and just collected a bunch of other cars.
Kurt Busch taps the back of Mike Skinner's car, which gets him loose and sends Skinner crashing into Kurt. Skinner's car slams the wall, collecting Terry Labonte in the process, and then comes down right in front of the path of Bobby Hamilton. And at that rate, all hell broke loose, as a total number of 12 cars were involved in the carnage. 10, however, managed to get repairs made and keep racing for the sake of getting points, while 2, that being Mike Skinner and Terry Labonte, got the worst of it in the end, with terminal damage, retiring from the race. So, we finally come to the final stages of the Pepsi 400, as I will stay silent and let you enjoy these final moments of brilliance and a storybook ending to the race, particularly in the case of Dale Earnhardt Jr.
11 laps to settle the Pepsi 400. Here we go.
Making deals.
On board with Dale Earnhardt Jr. Down to the inside. Not room there. Decides wisely, decides to back up a little bit.
Got to clear the lap cars first. Joe Nemechek, the 33, was up alongside Benson, the leader. He was the first one a lap down.
Boy, Jr. wants to go to the inside so badly. He doesn't have any choice now. He dives down to the inside.
Schrader pushed to the outside lane.
20 cars, the only one upstairs. Still outside.
Look at Junior go.
Still there.
Up to fourth.
Clear.
Here comes Bobby Labonte pushing through. Junior to the outside of Mayfield for third.
Seven's coming with you. Seven's coming.
Mike Wallace is coming with him. We can hear Ty Norris telling him, you got help on the outside, Junior.
There's Blaney block in the 93. What about Benson?
They're going to stay on the bottom of the racetrack. I think they're going to give the outside to Junior.
Jeff Gordon getting black flagged by NASCAR.
Still there.
Here's
Still
Dale
there.
Jr. to the outside of Dave Blaney for second spot. Mayfield pushes him along in the draft.
Still there. Still there.
To the outside for the lead in turn 4. Dale Earnhardt Jr. rockets to the front at Daytona. Listen to the crowd.
And look at this crowd behind him. Look at this race behind him. And Tony Stewart gets going underneath the yellow line.
Tony Stewart will be black flagged by NASCAR. Black flag for Tony Stewart for going below the out-of-bounds line.
You're all clear. All clear.
And Tony Stewart is in second spot with $1 million on the line.
Okay, 20's coming, but you're all clear. All clear.
Here comes Bobby Labonte. He's got $1 million on the line as well. It's Michael Waltrip who's pushing him toward the front.
And Labonte's underneath the yellow line on the backstretch.
This thing's not over yet. Will Michael Waltrip blocked for Dale Jr.? Will he try to win the race himself? White flag is out. Final lap at Daytona. 180,000 on their feet, screaming wildly. 2.5 miles to go.
Just exactly the opposite of the Daytona 500. It was 15 and 8. Elliott Sadler is trying to keep Bobby Labonte behind. He can't do it. But he does move down in front of Rusty Wallace on that fast line.
All clear. All clear.
Bobby Labonte looking for some help, trying to get up there. His teammate Tony Stewart has never answered the black flag.
And they're 4 wide back between the Wallace boys.
Here they come, turn 4, final lap of the Pepsi 400. Michael Waltrip in second, but it's going to be Dale Earnhardt Jr. using lessons learned from his father to go from 6th to 1st and score the victory in the Pepsi 400.
That's unbelievable.
Yes!
The man behind you did it for you. You guys celebrate. You love you, man. You did it.
That was beautiful. Very, very nice.
Junior, you're happy.
All right.
Look at that smile.
When you look back at the finish, you really cannot say much other than, wow. Dale Earnhardt Jr. did it for his dad, Michael Waltrip did it for his boss, and they both were right there in the grass celebrating victory. It is something from a storybook ending of sorts, but in real life. 20 years later, one of, if not the best moments in NASCAR history, period.
The finish is probably the most watched part of that race, no doubt about it. And I remember there's this picture that I've got saved on my computer. You can find it through a tough Google search, but it's this picture of Dale Earnhardt Jr. in the lead, and he's got a car length gap to the car behind him with like 3 or 4 laps to go, I think it was. I've seen it in the picture, and the picture has Dale Earnhardt's car like ghosted in, like Earnhardt was still pushing him, which was because, you know, at Daytona you're very close bumper to bumper, but all of a sudden Junior had this car length lead on the outside line, and someone etched in Earnhardt's car, and I thought that was a great picture that really described it, that Earnhardt was still there. But that finish, you know, it's definitely controversial if you're not a Junior fan, because it some people say it was rigged, some people say, you know, every driver let off, but you know, you're still trying to win the race no matter what the circumstances are. And
I think there was a mix of teamwork, but also trying to get the team victory as well. Not necessarily team orders, but the wildest part is he passed him right along the same area where his dad did pass away in turn 4. And that's what, I mean, for me, gives me the extra chills. That's just I mean, talk about conquering something that's just, that's something that feels impossible. And I mean, it's just, these stories are just unheard of. And racing brings on this. In Junior's case, he had a very fast car, even while it was by himself. He had a great car to work with, and who knows, he probably saw the air himself. But it was just, there's not many drivers that can really move their way through the field like that, and with such pressure on their shoulders.
I remember vividly Dale Jr. leading the last few laps. Everybody, the crowd is screaming. They're hoping, they're just holding their breath that he's going to come through, avenge his father's death. That was one of the greatest finishes in that. When I think of NASCAR history, that's one of the first three finishes that come to mind. Just a great night all together. I would have done anything to go in a time machine and sit in the stands for that race. Anything.
The best way to describe the finish and the celebration is hands down emotional. Very emotional. As Alan Bestwick said, using lessons learned from his father going from 6th to 1st, Dale Earnhardt Jr. comes through and wins the Pepsi 400, with Michael Waltrip finishing behind him in 2nd. Waltrip didn't celebrate his breakthrough win in the Daytona 500 months prior the way he wanted it to, but this time he definitely celebrated with his teammate and his crew members and enjoyed every second of it. In fact, every single person who witnessed this beautiful moment live 20 years ago, whether at the track or at home, enjoyed every second of this incredible, emotional victory celebration. Here is what Dale Jr. had to say in Victory Lane.
Man, I just don't know what to say. I'm wore out. I can't think. I guess I gotta thank my buddy Tony, my crew chief, for hanging in there with me. All my friends, all the guys on the crew, Budweiser, Remington. I got to talk all night.
How did you get to the front after the restart?
I had a great car. It was all car, 100%. I just holding on.
Yeah. You've learned a few things through the years, though, haven't you, from certain people?
Yeah. Yeah, he was with me tonight. I don't know how I did it, but he was there, and Michael helped me. I guess we're even now.
You told Marty Snyder, Dale, you felt lonely on Father's Day, and there were times that you wanted to cry, but you couldn't. Did you cry tonight?
I'll be crying sooner or later. I don't know. I feel so good right now. I'm wore out there.
You know when your dad got his first win at Daytona? His first Winston Cup points win came 11 years ago today, July 7th, 1990.
So special. I dedicate this win to him. I mean, there ain't nobody else that I could dedicate it to that it would mean more to me. I want to say hey to Teresa back home. I hope she's loving this because we sure are. Thank you.
As mentioned earlier, Michael Waltrip celebrated every second with his team with Dale Jr. after feeling so much satisfaction with a second place result. He didn't want to finish in 10th or lower. He wanted to finish in 2nd place behind that A car, and he did just that. Winning the Pepsi 400 would prove to be the first of what would be 2 more wins for Dale Jr. and the A-Team in 2001, and Michael Waltrip's best result since he won the Daytona 500 months before. In regards to Tony Stewart, he went below the outer bounds line while battling for position, and because drivers aren't allowed to advance position going onto the apron, Stewart was black flagged and was demoted to 26th, behind Kevin Harvick. Overall, the action-packed racing from the Pepsi 400 in 2001 was really good, as this would be the last time the aero strip on the roof of the vehicles would be used for a Winston Cup race at Daytona. The aero strip provides a lot of close, intense racing, especially in this race. Other than that, the 2001 Pepsi 400 saw 14 lead changes in total, with an average speed of 157.601 miles per hour, along with just 3 cautions, as well as a race length of 2 hours and 32 minutes long. Looking at the list of lap leaders, Dale Earnhardt Jr. led the most with 116. Sterling Marlin, who won the pole for this race, led the second most with 20, and the third most with 10 was car number 10 of Johnny Benson. Matt Kenseth had led 5 laps. 4 different drivers led 2 laps, with those being Michael Waltrip, Ward Burton, Todd Bodine, and Kevin Harvick. Robert Presley rounds out the list, leading just 1 lap. Considering this race was also one of the few of the Noble 5 program events during the 2001 season, here is where the following drivers from that program ranked after the conclusion of the Pepsi 400. Bobby Labonte ranks 5th, Jeff Burton finishes 8th, Mark Martin with a disappointing 18th place finish, finishing in the mid-pack. Kevin Harvick and Tony Stewart finished lower with 25th and 26th. And now for the top 3 anticipated categories. To those that have been watching my content for some time now, you'll know where I'm getting at with this. But for those that don't, myself and my friends will rank a certain driver from the following categories, which are driver of the race, driver on the move, and who was cold. Aside from Dale Earnhardt Jr., this may be a bit of a controversial one, but in my opinion and in my book, Michael Waltrip is my driver of the race. Here's why I think that. Because of his struggles all throughout the beginning stages of the 2001 season, having to deal with the loss of his boss/best friend, it was a rough, rocky road to cope, with not even a single top 10 finish after he won the Daytona 500 and prior to the Pepsi 400. When the Pepsi 400 rolled around, however, Mikey was back, leading a few laps and stayed out of trouble en route to a second place finish. As I mentioned earlier, he didn't celebrate his Daytona 500 win the way he wanted it to, but in the Pepsi 400, it was different. He celebrated the victory the way he wanted it to, and he certainly deserved it.
I'm gonna be nice here. I'm gonna say Dale Earnhardt Jr. because he took the lead early. He dominated. He fought for the lead every time someone challenged him. And when he was all the way back in 5th, 6th on the final restart with 5 to go, he showed everyone that he wanted to win. He had the fast car and passed everyone. And then 3 to go, he was leading. So that's who I say driver of the day is.
He had, only single-digit laps to get to the lead, and he had to fight against hungry drivers like Stacey Compton and Johnny Benson, who were searching for their first win, or when they have not, their maiden win. And Junior had to pass those drivers and really make something happen, and he did. He had to have followed the air, see the air, right? And made his move to the front, not just, passing one driver, but passing 5 drivers. And clutched his way to a victory.
If I was him going into this race, I would be a nervous wreck. It's the track that the last time they were there, took his father from him. And now he has to go race balls to the wall on that track. And he went and he took the win in a very commanding way. We saw he led pretty much the entire race and was never really in a position where it looked like he was going to lose the race, especially, nearing the end.
I mean, I think it's obvious. Dale Earnhardt Jr., coming back from, an emotional race, not only the win, but just to, strap in that car must have been just an absolute mountain to climb in his mind that, he's racing at the same track that just took his dad's life 6 months prior. So it was definitely, I think that really put him at the top for, driver of the day in terms of NASCAR.
Everyone can agree that Dale Earnhardt Jr. gets the driver of the day vote, simply because it was his third career NASCAR Cup Series win, and he got it done at the same track that claimed his father's life. He even led the most laps in the 2001 Pepsi 400, which is one of the most dominant performances from Dale Earnhardt Jr. when looking back at his restrictor plate racing history.
The driver of the race is obviously Dale Jr. Obviously, number one. I know, he it's so, remembered because he won, and people say that it was a little bit too real to be true, because people still say today that the race was rigged and that Dale Jr. won, on purpose because of what happened to Dale Earnhardt. But I don't believe that. I think Dale Jr., of course, I think Dale Jr. is obviously the driver of the race because he made people break down in tears. It was so emotional, and he did pretty good in the race, of course, him and Michael Waltrip, I guess I'll say DI in general, were the drivers that were doing really well in that race. And of course, they put their emotions aside a little bit and won and did really well, especially Dale Jr. and Michael Waltrip. Because Dale Jr., I think he said a couple times when he was driving down turn 4, you always remember what happened to his dad earlier that season. And I'm really proud of him of winning. And I can't believe that he went through it and seeing him going around the turn 4 and seeing his Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s, where he died, And I'm happy that he kind of pushed that away a little bit and focused on the race and focus of trying to win. So I think I'll say Dale Jr. and I guess I'll say Michael Waltrip were the drivers of the race.
Having started 40th and finished inside the top 10 in 6th, a great result from Nadeau, having proved to the race fans that he too can be a factor for good finishes at Daytona, or even Talladega for that matter.
40th place. 40th. Nowadays in NASCAR, that's last place with 4 uncharted cars added to the 36. 40th is basically dead last. Even though the draft is the equalizer, you can go from 40th to first in 5 laps. The fact that he was there, missed the big ones, kept his car out of trouble, and nobody really spoke of him, but he still managed to bring it home in 6th. That is an accomplishment.
Looking at the results would say Elliott Sadler, who started 38th, finished 3rd. But if I had to pick someone, I would definitely say Michael Waltrip, because not only was he moving throughout the field throughout the day, but he also, having that kind of very rough season, and the bounce back from that is pretty incredible, especially with the loss of Dale. So I'd put Waltrip as mine.
Elliott Sadler, my all-time NASCAR Xfinity Series driver, in my opinion gets the driver on the move vote. He started 38th and finished on the podium behind the DEI cars of Michael Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Plus, the Wood brothers always brought in a good package at Daytona during the early 2000s, and considering Sadler's third place run in 2001 Pepsi 400, it clearly showed.
Maybe I would say Bobby Labonte, because he started back in 33rd and he got 5th place. I think that was pretty good, Of course, Daytona and Talladega, you always see drivers that start all the way in the back. And of course, in video games as well, if you're racing at Talladega or Daytona, you start in the back. And if you really know how the race is, you can start in the back and you can win the race. Or you can start in the back and wreck. A lot of drivers in that race started in the back and moved their way up into the front, or stayed, they definitely moved up in the field. And of course, Daytona and Talladega is the type of race where you can start in the back and win the race. That's why I always love Daytona Talladega, because it's so unpredictable, and you don't know who's going to win until the final lap. So I think I'll say Bobby Labonte. I think because of the chart, he says 30-30 and went up to 5th place.
Bobby Labonte, he's a driver that will race you the way he wants to race. And, he obviously, was patient enough to move his way through the field and took the whole race to get up to the top 5. It wasn't until later he was a serious start for the win. And Joe Gibbs was a serious team at these super speedways too. They're no strangers to maybe not winning, but they were definitely, contenders.
Starting the race from pole, you'd expect Sterling Marlin to get a decent but valid finish and yet win the Pepsi 400 for the second time. Which, if we're going to be honest, potentially a top 10 or even a top 5 considering how fast the Silver Bullet was, but despite this, the car encountered handling problems, and to make matters worse, Marlin was involved in that big crash which really derailed his chances of a good finish. Instead of a top 10 or top 5, he ranked way down the order in 39th.
I'm going to have to give that one to Bill Elliott. Bill Elliott lost the draft early in the race, and Bill has a few wins, or had at the time, at restrictor plate races. But his team just never figured it out. They never found the speed, never got back in the draft. I felt like Dodge should have dropped back and helped their teammates. Like, I'm not going to say it was his fault that he finished where he did, but his race definitely could have been better. I would have expected more out of Bill Elliott at a Daytona race, better than 35th.
Well, I mean, at this point, it would have to be Mike Skinner, right? I mean, this is a guy that has been trying to get a win, right? And like, you're in a what is then a top ride. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it the B ride either, because I mean, you had the best driver in there for the longest time, and even Kevin Harvick produced many wins in RCR at his early career. But what I'm thinking is, for someone that makes it to the Cup Series and goes into a good team, and the results aren't there, I mean, I think that would deserve that award anyways. But Mike Skinner's my pick for that.
For the coach seat, my take would be Jeff Gordon. He had a good qualifying run, started 5th place on the grid. Sadly, he just did not have enough speed to win the Pepsi 400 for the 3rd time at this particular time. What makes the situation worse for him was that he was one of the many drivers in that 12-car crash. He was able to continue, yes. Unfortunately, Jeff Gordon was multiple laps down due to getting repairs made, and to make matters worse, he had an oil leak setting him behind the wall.
People think Jeff Gordon was going to do like a top 10 type of driver during that race, and of course the big one happened and he went to the bag. And of course I'll say Terry Labonte, Tony Stewart, even though he was like in his 2nd season, because I think he was a rookie in 2000. But I think I'll put him a little bit to the side. And I'll say the same thing to Kurt Busch, but Terry Labonte and Jeff Gordon, I have to say, because they're like, they race in the Cup Series. They race at Daytona for a couple of years, and they got used to the track. And of course the big one happened. So I guess I'll say Jeff Gordon.
He's always been a hero of mine. Growing up, he was that was his prime time in his career, and to see him start 5th and then finish all the way down the order in 37th is pretty shocking.
In conclusion, the 2001 Pepsi 400 will always and forever will be remembered by many NASCAR and motorsport fans as a whole, both old and new. The road to recovery for Dale Earnhardt Incorporated came right here in this event. Sure, the team had good moments such as Steve Park winning at Rockingham and finishing on a certain consistent basis, but for him, and especially Dale Jr. and Michael Waltrip, the healing point was this race 20 years ago. A storybook ending of the healing process. By the way, I'd like to thank those who agreed to be a part of this documentary. This took a lot, and I mean a lot of time, work, motivation, in-depth research, and effort to put this thing together. And without the help and support from my friends and fellow supporters who support my content, I just can't thank them enough. And because they were the ones who made this possible, special thanks and shoutouts to those who were in this documentary and to those that helped me get through hard times to finish this documentary on time and to get this documentary in the books. And to those that were in this documentary, y'all will be mentioned at the end in the credits. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, even though it's late and overdue, but at least it's done and it's out to the public for the world to see. If you like what you've seen, smash that like button to support this video and my content as a whole. If you're interested to watch more racing related videos such as this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you won't miss what I release on this channel. And until next time and further notice, peace out, stay safe, and have a good one.
You know, a lot of names that were unfamiliar at the front were looking to maybe get their first victory, or a victory that has been long waited for. And then you see Dale Jr. come out of nowhere, and just take the lead at the most opportune time.
I got put in a cart that wasn't even touched in like the last 24 hours, so I was out there giving my all, spinning out every corner with a cart that wasn't even used for today. I'm like, well, at least I got ninth, so.
I'm really glad that they were able to finally heal, but I think by that point, they had to realize that Dale would want them to race without him, with or without him.
Lots of green flag passing, lots of guys playing the strategy game on pit road. I feel like with NASCAR coming to Daytona a second time, and the drivers already knowing how to take care of their cars, how to maneuver in the draft, I feel like NASCAR, they perfected what they were trying to do. Great side-by-side passing, pack racing, shuffling for the lead. It was a great battle with the last 10 laps. Dale Jr. and Jeff, actually come to think of it, Jeff Gordon was having issues. I believe it was Michael Waltrip, a blue car. That's all I remember.
So after Sterling kind of got shuffled back later on in the race, Dale Earnhardt Jr., he ended up leading the race for a while too. And then there was a big crash that he avoided because he was out of the front. Yep.
They're unlucky.
Yeah.
They're not lucky.
Yeah, so he avoided that. And then I guess I'm not really sure how he got shuffled back a little bit, but I think at the restart he was starting in 6th. I guess he pitted or something.
Make room for Jeff Gordon, will ya? He's got the points lead going into this race. If you watch the Good Season 2001 from Black Flags Matter about Jeff Gordon, he had the points lead from then on, never looked back, and I'm telling you, if he didn't have any issues that day, he would have been another smooth sailing night for him. But hey, I guess you could have said it was all Junior's day.
Yeah, it was a lot of great racing, a lot of really close racing, even so close that there was a huge incident at one point that really wasn't caused by one driver hitting another driver. It's just the aerodynamic forces playing a major role in the cars.
A lot of cars, if you're in the middle of the pack, especially Daytona and Talladega, you mostly sometimes go in the front for a little bit, but then you go kind of in the middle, then the back. It's like a cycle, you know?
Kevin Harvick was also a factor at that time. As rookie and filling in for Dale Earnhardt, he had a lot to prove coming in from the Busch Series, as it was known at that time. His win at Atlanta was his third career Cup Series start. It was a very emotional win to a lot of fans. Harvick putting the number 3 with his fingers as he's taking victory lap around Atlanta. It still gives me goosebumps to this very day.
Earnhardt Jr. was going pretty well for a while too, and there's also this crash in the last. There's this massive crash in the last restart, and we can't forget to mention the fact that Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s victory was pretty good. It was a pretty good victory. His father would be so proud there, really.